Good morning and welcome to a day in the life vlog / a reminder of what the 10 moral codes of yoga are. As I take you through my day, we're going to have a chat about what the 5 yamas and the 5 niyamas are and how we might be able to implement them in different ways. I've been thinking recently and talking to a few people about what we consider a yoga practice to look like. What counts as practicing yoga? Do you have to be on your yoga mat doing poses? Do you have to be sitting in meditation? Or are there little moments throughout the day in the small decisions and the big decisions and the way that we interact with other people that we can implement the teachings of yoga? Personally, I think more and more that what happens off the yoga mat counts even more than the movements, the stretches, the things that we do when we're on our mats. It's the way that we carry these teachings into our day-to-day decisions and interactions. And I'd love to show you a really consistent morning routine here, but I've realised recently that I'm not actually someone who thrives on routines. I struggle to be consistent, so every day looks a little bit different from the last, which can be slightly chaotic. And it used to mean that I would get frustrated about my inability to have a consistent yoga practice. But now I know that I incorporate the teachings of yoga into my everyday life, even if it isn't in a particularly routine or structured way. One thing that I do try to implement is not going on my phone straight away in the morning. So having some quiet, peaceful time to myself before going into work mode or going to do whatever I need to do that day. And this morning I spent some time just quietly making a cup of tea, feeding Penny, enjoying the peace. And I had a short yoga, asana and meditation practice. And this takes me on to the first of the yamas and niyamas that we'll talk about, which is tapas. Not the delicious Spanish little foods, but tapas in Sanskrit meaning discipline. One of the ways that I practice discipline is by having this little quiet time in the morning before going on my phone and trying to make time for some kind of movement and breath work or meditation. Some days I fail and I end up picking up my phone straight away, scrolling through social media, but most days I make the choice to have some calm, mindful time first thing in the morning. And this is also similar to Brahmacharya, which means right use of energy, looking at the way that you want to live your life, the kind of person you want to be, and abstaining from activities that go against that. So this little morning practice for me was a way of considering tapas and brahmacharya. I just spent a few minutes stretching out my neck and shoulders as they were feeling a bit tight. Then I put a 5-minute timer on my watch and tried to pay attention to the sounds I could hear outside to give my mind a focusing point. Meditation practice is so variable for me. One day I can slip into a really peaceful state, and the next day my brain is so loud, full of thoughts, and I can get quite frustrated. But I know that it's a practice, so I keep coming back to it. I think of it as training for my brain. I train my body to get better at different types of movement through exercise, and through meditation I train my brain to get a little bit better at focusing and staying steady. And the nice thing about using my watch as the timer is it just gently buzzes on my wrist when the time's up. This morning my working day started with 2 hatha yoga practices. It was very foggy on the way in this morning, but lovely and warm in the studio. And 2 of the yamas that I tend to talk about in the classes that I teach, because they're ones that you can really bring into your practice on the yoga mat, are Ahimsa, non-harming, and Satya, truthfulness. So Ahimsa is about not causing or contributing to harm. And, in our day-to-day lives, we're looking at how we do or don't contribute to harm to others, but we're also looking at how we treat ourselves, not causing ourselves any harm. So when we're on the yoga mat, we can practice this by not pushing beyond our safe limits in different shapes and postures. And in Satya, truthfulness, again, we can be practicing when we're on the yoga mat, being really honest with ourselves about where that limit is. Are we pushing ourselves too far? Are we actually holding back and maybe we've got more to give? There are of course so many other ways that we can implement these 2 yamas into our lives, but that's kind of a simple way of
approaching them when we're on the yoga mat and getting familiar with those terms. Part of my Ahimsa practice of not causing harm to myself is listening to my body, and even when I'm teaching, taking breaks, and also making sure that I'm just the very basic things, drinking water, fueling my body in the right ways for my work. And then after the class, Sean came to meet me, so I had a coffee and I had my laptop with me, did some work, and I actually treated myself to some lunch because I had been disorganised and hadn't got lunch ready at home. And then it was a pretty quick turnaround for my next class. I had to get into Stamford Park and drive to my 1 p.m. yoga class. Just had a really lovely class. This was the Mindspace yoga class that I love teaching. So Mindspace being our local mental health charity. So it's a free class really. It's donation based, so if people want to leave a donation, they can, but really it's open to anyone, it's free. And that feels really important to me, to be able to offer something like that, where there's a yoga practice that's accessible for everyone. And I do my best to make sure that the contents of the class, what the actual, physical postures, the breath work, everything we do, I try to make it as accessible as possible on all levels, physically, mentally, emotionally accessible. So it feels like a really valuable class to teach and be part of. I love it so much. The yogic teachings that come to mind with this are aparigraha, which is kind of non-hoarding, non-greed, and asteya, which is non-stealing. And both of these kind of concepts are about not taking more than you need, not holding on and hoarding things. Being mindful of taking more than you need is something that's on my mind. I think as a business owner and as someone who makes money through teaching yoga, I'm always very cautious and aware of not getting greedy in what I'm doing. And it's difficult because of course you've got to make a living, but there are people who would argue that yoga should never be a business, that you shouldn't be making money from it. And it's definitely something that I'm aware of. I consider it a lot in my choices for what I agree to doing and what events I put on and what classes I teach. I try and have that in mind. It doesn't mean, so that teaching of sort of non-greed or not taking more than you need, doesn't mean that we should throw away all our possessions and detach from everything. This idea of non-attachment is something that's always interesting to talk about, because particularly in our Western mindset, we might think that non-attachment means not forming connections with people, so not getting attached to people and not having any things, not having possessions. Which is unrealistic and unhealthy. We need things, we need people in our lives. So really the idea of non-attachment, in the way that I understand it, is not attaching too much value to the things that you own. There's that wonderful quote that is, the things you own end up owning you. So it's not attaching too much emotional value or sort of currency to the things that you own. We have so many amazing conversations about these kind of topics when we're on yoga retreats. I always like to talk about these moral values, because everyone has different opinions on what they mean and how they apply them into their own lives. But sometimes we can get a little bit too regimented in our thinking, and we want there to be like a hard and fast rule that we have to follow. And that's not quite what it is. There are these teachings, we read about them, we think about them, we consider them, and then we figure out how to implement them in our own individual lives, and that's going to look slightly different for everybody. Anyway, that was a wonderful class for Mindspace. I've got a very full donation box here to go and drop off at their office later. I have a bit more work I would like to get done, as in admin, laptop work. But in the meantime, I'm going to be going outside and doing some walking. We have a friend's dog that we're helping out with walking at the moment. He has lots of energy. He's much bigger than Penny. We took Penny and this dog for a walk together yesterday, a long walk round the fields, and Penny was absolutely wiped out by the end. So she's going to have a much shorter walk today, but we're taking the big dog, and I'm excited. We had a very muddy and very fun walk with the big dog, and it was nice to be able to do it with Sean. And this brings me on to santosha, contentment. Practicing being content with what we have right now. So this doesn't mean that we're settling, doesn't mean that we're not going to have goals and other things that we want to accomplish in the future, but santosha is about recognizing where you are in this very moment, what you have, who you are, and finding gratitude in that. We so often have this mindset of, I'll be happy when. I will be happy when I lose half a stone. I'll go on holiday when I lose half a stone and I feel happier with how I look. Or maybe I will be happy when I've earned more money, or I have my own house, or I have a family. This practice of santosha, I think, is really important in finding gratitude in the right now. And so being out walking these dogs with Sean was so joyful. Penny was too tired to do the full walk, so we picked her up for the last leg of the walk so that her and her big buddy could have some fun time walking together. I'm now back from the walk, and I'll tell you about the last two. I think we're down to the last two of the Yamas and Niyamas. So Saucha is one of the Niyamas, and this means cleanliness or purity. Saucha is about removing impurities. So it's partly about looking after yourself in terms of cleanliness, looking after your environment. As you might be able to tell from little snippets of seeing my house, and I've already confessed in this video that my life is chaotic. The house is kind of chaotic too. We have bikes that are fixed on the wall over here, and I mean, I won't even show you what's over in that direction. So Saucha is one that I need to work on a little bit. It's one that I don't always do so well with in terms of keeping my space tidy. But the other side of Saucha is not just about cleanliness in our environment, but it's also purity and cleanliness in the way that we look after ourselves. So diet, exercise, looking after our physical and mental health is a type of Saucha practice. And then the last one, oh no, I'm realizing now there's two more. There's two more I haven't mentioned. One is svadhyaya. That's, I think, my favorite Sanskrit word, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. I believe I am. This is self-study, self-inquiry. And I'm actually going to be doing a bit of this evening because I have booked myself a yoga class. I don't often make a lot of time to go to yoga classes as a student, and I'm trying to do it more often. And part of the reason is because when we're on the yoga mat, we are encouraged to do this, svadhyaya, self-study. We're spending time with ourselves, our minds and bodies, and having a personal experience, and that's really important to me. And the last one, Ishvara Pranidhana, is about surrendering, letting go of control, and actually celebrating that lack of control in a way, celebrating that there is something greater, that we are not in control of absolutely everything we do. And I think a yoga practice also helps us to practice this, particularly when we come into Shavasana. Sorry, the battery died, but the final thing I was going to say was Shavasana, that corpse pose, is a practice of surrender. It's a practice of letting go, of Ishvara Pranidhana. And that's part of what I'm really looking forward to in this class. So I'm going to get my stuff together and go and treat myself to a wonderful yoga class. I've been so looking forward to this because it's a teacher that I have known through social media for a long time, but I've never actually made it to one of her classes before. I'm really looking forward to meeting her. I always encourage people, I've talked about this before on this channel, to go to as many classes as you can and have experiences with as many yoga teachers as you can, because each yoga class is going to be different and each yoga teacher is going to have something new to share with you. So I will wrap up this video by getting myself to a yoga class. I hope you found this interesting. I'm going to leave a little page at the end, a screen with the list of the 5 yamas and the list of the 5 niyamas, so that you can read through and just remind yourself what they are. And let me know in the comments. I'd love to know which ones you feel very connected to, which ones you think you naturally do day to day, and which, if any, you think you maybe have a bit more work to do on. Maybe there's one in particular that stood out to you in this video that you really want to focus on going forwards and find a bit more time for. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another video very soon.